This conference will now be recorded.
Okay, being 6 o'clock, we'll bring the Tilton Budget Committee of October 30th, 2024 to order. We'll start with the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge
allegiance to the flag of the United States of America, to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
So why don't we just do the minutes real quick, and then we'll have Tim present.
Make a motion to approve the minutes of October 9th as presented.
I'll second.
We didn't do much, did we?
No. I'm gonna abstain.
Any discussion? All those in favor, say aye.
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 Opposed? Nay? Okay, the ayes have it. All right. We will entertain Tim Pearson with the town budget draft.
Great. I'm going to take you through just a very quick overview. One that I did for the Selectmen, but updated for the changes that have been made to the budget. So if you turn to the TV or the wall, so these are all based off of the departmental requests. So the Selectmen haven't weighed in on any of the individual lines or departments or personnel, any of that. So in short, what you're looking at is a 3.6% increase from year to year, or $215,000. And we'll be going through each individual department, but you can see on the right where the changes are in terms of percentages and dollars. The largest increase is in the police department, and the largest decrease is in public works. And I'll take you through the reasons for that. In terms of which department makes up what portion of the 25 budget, you can see here it's not hard to figure, which is the police, and that makes up over 40% of the budget. In terms of by function, personnel and personnel-related costs, retirement, health insurance, taxes, uniforms, that sort of thing, takes up over 61% of the budget. In the administrative budget and in the other budgets as well, and I'm going to do this very briefly because we're going to go through all this in great detail, but essentially there were a lot of changes between how this was budgeted last year and what we're looking at this year because of there was a lot of personnel change. So in the administrative budget, the town administrator changed. As you know, we hired Scott Hilliard in September, and we had another town administrator at the beginning of the year. So there was a change in salary there. The support staff was changed. So originally there was an administrative assistant, and now we have 1.5 positions budgeted in this line. The merit wage pool in the administrative budget and also in highway and police for non-union personnel are all budgeted at 4%. Last year, the non-union members were budgeted at 3%, and the union was budgeted at 4.5%, which they receive automatically. This year, the union's budgeted at 4%, and as the selectmen have generally liked to provide the non-union employees the same increase as the union employees, that's how it's budgeted in this budget. It does not mean that the non-union employees are going to receive 4%. It is still a merit increase and based on performance. And as such, it could fluctuate either above or below. The election lines, you'll see this year we had 4 elections. Next year we've got 1 election. There's a reduction in New Hampshire retirement mid-year. And then also part of the hiring of the town administrator, there was an exclusion for retirement for that position because of his status with New Hampshire retirement. So we were able to save that. We are still waiting for the Board of Selectmen to decide on a multi-year assessing contract. And currently we're with Avatar through 2024. And Avatar has bid on it along with another company. I chose to put the more expensive company into this budget so that it'll be this or less, depending upon what the board decides.
Who was higher, Avatar or the new one?
Avatar was by about maybe about 3% over the course of 5 years. So in town clerk, tax collector, finance and IT budgets, there's not a lot going on here. The only thing to keep in mind is that the town clerk tax collector line, it's an elected position, so it's budgeted a little differently. It doesn't appear, and it's not included in the merit line. And that is by statute. Again, the elections are reduced. In finance, I was able to reduce that budget by about almost $20,000. And some of that was due to the long-term debt, some anomaly in the repayment schedules. But then also in the past, we've been very successful in managing cash flow with a tax anticipation note, which is a line of credit. So we borrow and we pay back during the year as we need it, which is a little unusual for most towns. Most towns don't do it that way. But we're able to manage and keep our interest expense really low. In the past, I've usually locked in at the end of the year when rates are still trailing and low. And like before, let's see, in late 22, we locked in for 23 because rates were still dirt cheap. So we went from about 1% to 3.75%, I think. It's in the budget document you have. And this year we were at 5.25. So for 25, I'm not going to have a rate. I'm going to wait as long as we can to lock in a rate into 2025, anticipating that the rates are going to come down some, hopefully. But again, it's one of those unknowns, and we'll just have to do the best we can. We have been very successful with the amount of fund balance that we have, that we haven't had to borrow as much as we originally anticipated. And some of that borrowing anticipation was due to the anticipation of spending money on the bridge this year, which we didn't spend, and some for Caliph Hill, some of which we have spent. But in any event, that's where we are with that. And information technology budget, the big thing for 2025 is we're having to upgrade to Windows 11 Pro, and we've done about not quite 2/3 of the town. The PD has the most systems that still have yet to be replaced. And other than that, it's increases in licenses and services. And the land use budget, so this is another area where things really flip-flopped in terms of personnel. There's an overall increase of 8%. And in 23, we had a full-time land use coordinator and a part-time land use technician. Those positions were flip-flopped, and we now have a part-time land use coordinator and a full-time land use technician. And that has generated the increase there. We've been able to reduce the advertising line to $1 because now per RSA or state statute that we're able to advertise but without having to use newspapers by doing it a certain way on the website. And then there's an increase in professional consulting for land use. As with the number and complexity of projects that have come forward, we've had to use not only engineering services, but legal services for the land use department. And then, of course, postage. All the boards, many of the board members require mailed packets as opposed to emailing or some other means. So there's a lot more that's going out via mail. In public works and sanitation, there's an overall decrease. Again, a big change in personnel. We had lost our director this last year. We went through a period in rehiring a director out of the crew. And then in addition, we had a recycling attendant budgeted, and that was replaced now for 2025 with a 10-hour per week part-time person that we're hoping will help out at the transfer station now that we'll be bailing and hopefully producing some recycling revenue. Equipment and maintenance and repair was increased because our prior director was also a mechanic and did the work. We're having to send things out now. And then equipment purchases, various tools and things that the mechanic had that we now have to replace and have in-house. So there's some money for that. And then in terms of our solid waste and collection contracts, so our contract with Pinard now, Casella, there were set increases. We're in the third year of a 5-year agreement. I may correct that when I read what it actually says in the budget. I forget exactly, but we're about midway, a little more than midway through our contract with them. I think it expires in 2026. And there were increases for that. And then also our tipping fees. So when our trash is collected, it's taken down to Wheelabrator and Concord. And we're part of a consortium, and we have a 7-year agreement with that. And each year the tipping fees go up. So for 2025, it's $95 a ton. And we produce over 1,600 ton a year. In the police department, so there's an overall increase of 193,000. Changes in personnel, again, it's an increase of 216,000. And you'll see there was an encumbrance of 35,000 for a cruiser from last year. That's why the overall increase is less than that 216,000. But it includes a full-time detective position and a patrol position, both of which are open right now. And in terms of equipment, maintenance, repairs, and tech for them, body cameras, tasers, we're looking at a new 5-year agreement with Axon, which is the vendor. And we have been successful in getting a grant for a portion of that, but also it is very expensive, and the chief has done a great job in terms of using some equipment that they already have and finding ways of using less of the evidence.com where we have to for long-term storage. So we're going to be providing some of that storage ourselves. So we've been able to pare it down some, but it's still a pretty expensive contract. It is not finalized at this point, so it is possible that there could be some changes to that, but I don't expect them to be major. We also pay for radio recording, Belknap Tower, and the Celebrate license is how we dump phone information on cell phones from suspects. Vehicle maintenance was increased based on a formula that we set up in terms of the detail cars, the mid-level administrative cars, and then the frontline vehicles. And there are 3 frontline Tahoes that are all relatively new. So that's been, we don't expect a lot of expense there. But we did just replace 2 of the administrative vehicles. In fact, they are being delivered tomorrow, I believe, that we purchased. Both used, they're both police interceptor utilities, and they'll replace 2 old police interceptor sedans that had in excess of 160,000 miles each, and were going to cost just too much to repair. So we were able to get both vehicles for less than the price of one new vehicle, and both had pretty low miles on them, and they are police interceptor types. In terms of, I already mentioned the equipment purchases, we had a $35,000 encumbrance from the prior year, and that was the one reduction. So in health and welfare, culture, recreation, health and welfare, the major thing there is that the general assistance line, while it's only half spent so far year to date, as you'll see in the budget, the Human Services Director felt as though with the absence of so many grant programs out there and other support services for people, that there was going to be more reliance on the town. And therefore, she increased her general assistance line by $10,000, which was the majority of the increase. And then in culture and recreation, you've probably already seen Home Memorial Library was up 19,000 and change, and Park Cemetery increased slightly. In terms of the outside agencies, I'm not going to go through these because you've probably already seen the increases in these, but the only one I really wanted to make note of is that Youth Assistance Program had grants last year. So it looks like it went up a lot this year, but they had grants last year that they passed through to Tilton and Northfield. So we actually paid a lot less. So, and she budgeted less because of that. So now it looks as though it's going up a great deal of money, but she hasn't actually received any of her allocations for 2025 yet. So she's anticipating there'll be some grant money for her, and she'll be able to do the same that she did last year. But that remains to be seen. Other than that, there are some areas where I think there are some opportunities for the Selectmen Budget Committee to look at. And Bill, I know you're always talking about revenues. We're going to get more revenue. And one of which is we're going to have to, in order for us to maintain our 10-year highway equipment plan, we need to be putting away about $60,000 a year at a minimum. And so the idea is that, and you'll see when we get to the warrant articles, that there's a warrant article recommended for $60,000 for highway equipment. What I'd like to see done is that we reestablish the revolving fund for recycling, and that as we generate revenues from the baling and that sort of thing, as people bring in their cardboard and tin cans and whatnot, that money goes into the revolving fund. And at the end of the year, let's say there's $5,000 in it. So then that next year, the warrant article will be for $55,000 and the balance will be made up from the recycling fund. If it's $20,000, then the warrant article only needs to be 40. So it also establishes the fact that as citizens are recycling, they know they're also helping to offset their taxes and make sure that there's proper equipment for the highway group. So that's one thing. In terms of fees, so the land use and permitting fees are pretty significantly outdated. We've been doing a study comparing them to other towns and looking at the effort of some other things, including some state fees. And we're currently trying to finalize a recommendation to the Board of Selectmen to adopt a new fee schedule. Same thing goes for the transfer station. Probably our largest expense on an annual basis that is difficult to determine how much it's going to be is the amnesty week. So, there are some opportunities in terms of going to a coupon system like what Northfield does, and not having an actual week where you bring your things, but you can buy your coupons here in town hall and take it and pass along the coupon, so that there's a little more integrity in the system. What we see right now is there's still quite a bit of abuse of Amnesty Week, where these are stickers that you can peel off because they're static stickers and you can hand to somebody else. And there seem to be a number of people that were reported that were bringing in things that don't live in town, or multiple trailer loads of asphalt shingles and things like that. So, there are places where contractors can take things. They can go to Casella on 140. They get weighed when they come in. They pay their fee. And but what happens is, because we have this kind of open, not as tight as it could be, system down there, we end up with a lot of cost. And so that's one of the things. The other thing is, we could go to a single amnesty week during the year, and that'd be about a $15,000 savings. The other thing is there is some money in the budget for the design of a septic system down at DPW. That was supposed to have been done back in 2002, and it hadn't been done. There's some question about whether you could even get a septic system in there because of the perk tests. There's wetlands. So, and putting a connection to the sewer system, we're looking into what that's going to cost, but I got to believe that's probably going to be prohibitively expensive. So we spend about $3,000 a year pumping this holding tank that's currently there. And I would expect that we'd be able to save about $12,000 out of that line were we to continue to do that activity. So other than that, that is just the very high level. And great. So you all have copies of the budget. I'm getting it. Clip it right on. So you all have copies of this budget. And I will take you through each one of these. And for those of you that have seen them before, it's in the same general format. There's a few lines that have changed slightly here and there, but overall it's in the same organization, same format as in prior years. You can see where we are year to date for the 24 budget, the budget and actual, and we're running below our expense budget year to date, which is great. We will have some budgetary funds left over at the end of the year, which I've talked to the board about, certain encumbrances and year-end spending so that we don't have to raise and appropriate money, and certain things that we might be able to take out of this budget and purchase now that are deemed to be required. But otherwise, we're looking at a $215,000 increase, or 3.6%. So on page 2, this is the administrative budget, and this is the department manager is the town administrator for this portion. The salary for the selectmen, there are 5 selectmen. Any of the volunteer positions within this budget are paid at $400 each, and that includes alternates. And you'll see as we go through any of these committees, it's the number of people that are on it times the $400 for the year for those positions. The selectmen are paid monthly. In terms of other items here, you see the trustees of the trust funds. Again, there is a line with $1 in it for administrative part-time overtime. And in the past, there have been occasions where we've had to either have the deputy town clerk tax collector or the administrative assistant work overtime. So in general, when you see $1 left in the line, that's because in order to spend it out of there, even if we're going to overspend it, we have to have something. So you can see we've spent $1,810 this year in overtime. And again, there was a lot of turnover at one point in time, which required doing that. The salary for the town administrator in 2025, it's budgeted at $88,500. That's down from $115,000 in 24. Support staff is up. And again, in the prior year, it was 1 position. It's now 1.5 positions. And then administrative compensation absences. So there's an employee benefit for those people that have worked more than 7 years, and that's in the PD as well as town hall. They can buy out a certain portion of their time, and this is where it would be expensed to. The merit raise pool covers 10 employees within the town hall, and that's budgeted again at 4%.
But there was 0 used year to date.
So there's a difference this year. So in prior years, I used to allocate all the merit to the individual lines, and it was always a tussle to kind of explain how that worked, because all of a sudden there was no budget because the budget had been moved to those lines that were awarded the amount. So it was difficult to see how much somebody got, which is now you'll be able to see as you look through this, how much someone received in terms of an increase. But then also, you didn't see the total amount that was budgeted. So I think this is a little clearer. But again, it's one of those things, you either have to allocate the budget to the other individual lines, and this would then show 0 budget and essentially 0 expense. Everything would be allocated out.
When are they determined?
Those are generally done in the late May, June timeframe for the prior year. So in any event, the office supplies, you can see we're projecting that's going to be flat. Travel expenses, this is when the town car is not available. We do have a vehicle that we purchased this year for the building inspector that was a used police interceptor. That's been working pretty well. Administrative dues, we're anticipating that to be flat again as well. Postage, that is more than likely going to be up. In addition, we've done mailings this past year to individual groups. So when Morrison Avenue, there were issues with paving there, we sent letters to the citizens that lived or abutted it. From the Selectmen's office, there were also letters that were sent to people on Caliph Hill Road about that, and then also regarding your assessments. So there's a lot more mail going out than had been in prior years, which I can attest to. Printing, this is for our town report, and I'm anticipating, we always try to keep it concise, but everybody wants to get everything in every year. So there are some people I just got to try to keep to a page from time to time. But generally speaking, that's about, with the increases in costs, what we're looking at for this next year. Only when we have some big warrant article, bond article, or something like that would we be budgeting more than that.
Tim, on the town report, is this online as well? Or?
We do. Mm-hmm.
And then this is what's at the town meeting that's sitting on the table.
Mm-hmm.
And what happens to all the extras?
We generally don't have extras.
200's not a lot.
Yeah.
Really?
So what
I always
happens?
see them on the table.
What happens is people come into town hall. They want to get their town report. They take their town report with them. Then they come to town meeting. Oh, where's my town report? I don't have my town report. Let me grab a town report. And so sometimes people end up with multiple town reports. I've in the past sometimes I've done like a supplement that just contains the cover, the dedication memoriam, and then the budget and warrant. For so that we can have some copies of those, so nobody's sitting there without anything to look at. But this past year, we actually the selectmen had us order more copies because we were out when all was said and done. So, and of course, when you order a smaller batch, it's more expensive as well.
Who do we have doing the printing?
Brayshaw. RC Brayshaw is the company. They do just about, gosh, they probably do 30 or 40 towns.
Okay.
It's one of the main things they do.
We don't do any town report printing at the prison.
Okay.
It's too much aggravation.
Oh,
Sure,
yeah.
yeah.
Oh my gosh.
We used to do it here in the building and big
We've-
time aggravation.
We've been asked, but we won't do it.
Mhm.
Not worth it.
Yeah, and I produce a PDF that we put on the website, and people could print out the portions that they want. But invariably, we have to have it by law available in town hall the week before town meeting, the Tuesday before the first Tuesday of town meeting. So in any event, you see there's a line for training, conferences. It's usually their general conferences held throughout the year. Not a lot was used this year because we were very short-staffed at one point. And there wasn't time permitting to go to any of the conferences. And then now most of the conferences are done at this point in the year. The equipment maintenance and repair, this is for our, some of the larger items in town hall. These are the inspections and certifications for these things, which is an expense that we incur each year. The administrative advertising, we have had to advertise for personnel positions. This is also where we have used a service like Indeed or something else. This is where it gets charged to, and that is not cheap to use, I can tell you.
Mhm.
But we also advertise on all the municipal boards when we're looking for personnel. Administrative equipment rental and maintenance. So this is primarily we had to upgrade our postage machine, which we actually saved, I think, a penny per quarter on the new machine. You can't buy them; you have to lease them. The postal system went to a whole new barcode kind of thing. You had to be barcode compliant. And so we've just recently received that. And then we also have our security shredder, which is picked up periodically when it's full. So we only pay for that when it's at its max. And we are going through a purge right now in the basement of some of the records rooms that are down there. So it's really important to have that.
Who do you use
time.
for shredding?
It is, I want to say Data Destruction. I know that's not the name.
There's Mountain something.
No, it's not. I know you're talking about. It's not Iron Mountain. It's.
Have you gotten quotes on that? Because
we have in the past. The PD uses the same, and right now we have an area in a secure area downstairs that's still housing some PD things that have to be gone through. And then there's also a great number of records that have to be culled in one of the other locked areas downstairs. So when these things come out, it's in volume that we have to get rid of it. And these are big kind of, garbage can sized
Yeah,
things.
I know,
Bonfire.
no,
Uh,
the paper flies, but Northeast Record Retention might be able to compete with that price.
okay, I'll
They're in Hooksett. I know the owners, so
Northeast Record Retention.
yeah. Russ Latender is the owner.
Yeah, we're not tied to anybody, so okay. Outside of that, let's see. We generally equipment purchases. You're going to see this is going to be higher spent. Usually, when we get new employees, there's certain things that are required, and it's usually chairs. Of all things, we go through chairs like you can't believe. And then miscellaneous expenses. This can be anything from awards. It can be candy for the parades. A lot of candy for the parades. Candy for Halloween. A lot of candy. The wreaths are also paid out of here, and then any background checks that we pay for through the state, we have to do. We have to pay the state for both motor vehicle and criminal record background checks when we're hiring people. Consulting outside contracts on page 3. So again, this is just keeping the line open. And we have had to spend money this year on certain things. And then you see some of in any of these lines where you see they're bolded, these are coming from calculations typically. And if you ever get down to the bottom one of these and you're running a tape, if you will, or adding it up, you'll see sometimes there's $1 plus or minus, and that's because these are generated off of calculations. When we go to the final budget, when you're voting for something, I will have removed any of the rounding things so that it'll come out even. But occasionally there's that hanging chad of $1 that just is so frustrating. So I just want to let you know. But those are all these things that you see that are bolded. Those are all calculated coming off of another area where all the wages are calculated, the Social Security, Medicare, insurances, all that sort of thing. The salary for the moderator, that was reduced because of the one election next year, and anticipating that also when there's a change of moderators, I know we're going to be going through change of equipment in this next year. We have to purchase some new equipment for the elections, and there is an awful lot of training people have to do, whether you're new or been experienced in it. And our moderator has gone through quite a bit this year. So it's not exactly a one-for-one. It's not like looking at this year's and saying, well, gee, we only budgeted $2,500. Well, I can assure you we are going to blow through that because we haven't gotten to the biggest election of all of them. And within this moderator line, you have to keep in mind the moderator has at their discretion the ability to assign assistant moderators and other people that are participating in the process during the election. Those aren't all necessarily charged out of that line, but some are. The salary for supervisors of the checklist, this was reduced again because of the single election next year. Election and registration, this was reduced quite a bit from 10,000 to 3,000, again for the same reason. And this last year when we were sort of anticipating, well, what are we going to need? And honestly, there was a lot of blank stares. So so that was kind of a shot in the dark. I don't think we're going to expend that full 10,000 this year. So 3,000 should be more than adequate for next year. In terms of our insurance, Medicare, life and disability, retirement for Group 1, there you'll see there is a reduction in Group 1 retirement, which is a slight one that's effective July 1st. And there is still, I believe there's still a bill before the legislature. The legislature used to pick up about 35% of our retirement costs years ago for all state and local government. And then, do you remember what year that went away? I don't quite remember which year it was, but it was around maybe 11 or 12. That just sort of, we're not going to do that anymore. And so now that's been kicked around again, but nothing to my knowledge has passed. But at some point, that could be. In terms of health insurance, these are really outside of our control. We budget as best we can for single, two-person family plans. With new positions, we anticipate, say, on a lower end patrol, we're anticipating more of a single plan. We also offer buyouts of our insurance that are pretty healthy. So we offer $7,500 buyout for a family plan, $4,500 for a two-person, and
A question. Did you
yes.
get an increase in cost for insurance?
We did. We had an overall 8.3% increase, which was a lot less than last year. Last year it was much higher, but all costs along the way have increased, and that's with Health Trust also paring back some prescription drugs. I believe they pared back all the I don't know what they're called. SP something, the Ozempic and Wegovy and Zip something, forget the name of it. But so the Board of Health Trust has determined that was a very large cost for them this last year. So maybe that'll have some bearing on our premiums for next year. And I believe it was, I want to say it was something across the entire group of something like $6 million that had been spent just on those that class of drugs, and which are, someone could still access it if there's certain medical requirements, but otherwise, if it was just purely for weight loss, they're not able to in 2025, I think effective March 1st. Dental insurance, the town does offer dental insurance for the employee only, and the employee pays for any two-person or family plans beyond that. Recording fees are for liens or any other type of document that we would have to record through the county. Tax map update, this is for our GIS system. We pay for the license on an annual basis. And then also we pay for time and materials for updating the lot line adjustments or subdivisions. And this is one area that I've felt for years, and I've talked to trying to get this changed, because this is one of these costs where the person or group that's applying to have the lot line adjustment should be paying the cost of having the GIS system modified for that. In other words, the townspeople didn't generate this change, so why should townspeople pay for something that was specific to a given applicant? So my take is, and that's one of the things that I'm presenting in the new fees for permitting to the Board of Selectmen, is that there's an average of what it costs per change, and to include that as part of the application process when somebody is making that change. So that would be, maybe $500 during the course of the year. Reappraisal of property, this is for our new contract. The board had asked for both a 1-year and a 5-year. So what's priced in here is the cost of the 5-year. I believe over the entire 5 years, the entire cost for the annual amount of $45,500 per year. And that's for doing 1/5 of the data over the course of the year, doing the pickups and that sort of thing, responding to abatements. And then in the update, you're doing the entire update, and that process, which we just went through, is somewhere around $330,000 or $340,000 in total. So,
When are they going to decide on this budget? I mean, on this contract?
I would hope that they would do it very soon. The board has had it for a few weeks, or I should say for a few meetings.
Yeah.
They've seen the contract, and as I said, there's only about a difference of 3%. We sent it out to, I believe there were 8 companies. Most of them declined because everyone is full up, basically. We had one other response.
3%, what's that in dollar amount?
It was, I think overall it was about $11,000 over the course of the 5 years, including the update. So
My opinion, they've been, I don't know if I'm on. Hello?
you have to get it closer.
My opinion is, if they've been your assessor for all these years, it's going to cost you a lot more to train another company and bring them in to save 11.
Who doesn't know anything about the town?
That doesn't know anything about the town.
Well,
Yeah,
the big challenge too is that the assessor is responsible for supporting the assessments. And with the commercial property that we have in town, we sometimes will receive challenges on values from commercial real estate divisions or from hired guns that'll go up and down Main Street and sign people up. Hey, if I save you $1, I get 30 cents on every dollar I save you in your tax bill. And then they start filing the paperwork, and we have all this work to do. And sometimes, it'll result in other fees or having to get a commercial real estate appraisal. The town will have to get a separate appraisal. Some of those are, generally speaking, those are about $7,500, depending upon the size of the commercial property and the complexity of it. So the company that we have is very well versed and has dealt with some very challenging challenges in the past. But in any event, it's about a 3% difference. And the board did ask to see what was out there to just make sure that we weren't overpaying. And so that's where that is. Sure.
Why did the town hall FICA Medicare go down? I somehow missed that.
So if you look at the overall wages, so there was a significant wage decrease with the town administrator.
Okay, that's where
So that was
mostly come from.
that was part of the reason. That's correct. Yeah.
Okay, that's what I thought. But I just wanted to check with that.
Yep. The let's see. General legal expense. So this originally it looked like we might be able to shave this a little bit based on what we've spent so far this year, but there are a number of outstanding cases, and it's just one of those things. We do have the ability per state statute to overspend the budget for certain judgments and things like that. And that has happened once while I've been here, a long time ago. But there are a lot of issues that we're dealing with right now. And I do think that as we go into this new year, once people receive their tax bills, I think we're probably going to see a good amount of abatements coming in. Most of those aren't going to require any kind of legal assistance, but there will be that share that will. So in any event, that's staying steady, even though we're not overspent yet in that line. Town hall janitorial, this works out to be $99.48 twice a week. I've felt for some time, but I don't get a lot of agreement on this, that we only need it once a week for 6 months of the year and twice a week for 6 months of the year. But but overall, I think the board's been pleased with the service that we've been getting, and when there has been a lapse in service, they've credited us. And the Parks Commission, as you'll see later in the budget, has asked for a separate quote from them, and I think we have used just about every single janitorial company there is in existence within a 30-mile radius or more, maybe, at one time or another. Anyway, that's the cost just for town hall, and that does not include supplies. We budget for those separately, as you'll see. Town hall electricity, we're still locked in at a great rate through 26, and that's the beginning of 2026. And I'm anticipating we're going to spend a little bit less, as we now have all LED lighting on the first floor. That was part of the retrofit last year when we did the abatement of lead. And in terms of town hall heat, the same thing. A new boiler went in last year that was much more efficient. And Selectman Scanlon had asked me, originally I had this budgeted the same amount, and he asked me to go back and look at the efficiency and the BTUs and that sort of thing. And I took my best swag at this and reduced it by $2,000. Sewer, water, this is municipal sewer and municipal water that we pay, that should come in right around budget for this year. Town hall maintenance and repairs. So In terms of 2025, and this is one of the items that I think that I'm recommending to the board that they do pay out of this year's budget, which is the stage HVAC system. So you'll see we have many splits in here. The first floor, we lost our air conditioning this year, which is why you see that we're overspent in town hall maintenance and repairs for 2024. And that was a 20 plus 25-year-old system that finally failed. Of course, at the warmest time of the year, always happens. But in any event, the one area that is not heated or air conditioned, or I should say air conditioned sufficiently or at all, is the stage area, which is back behind this wall. And that is also considered to be one of the areas in town hall that could be better utilized, I should say, for office space. And if you ever had occasion to step into the land use office here, when the building inspector is here, the land use technician is there, the land use coordinator is there, and then once a month the assessor is in there, sometimes more than once a month, but generally once a month. It's impossible to get in there, and then people come in, I want to build this shed, or an engineer will come in with plans and want to talk, and there's very little room there. So,
And I'm also in there.
And also Sue is in there. So so the town administrator and I have talked about different ways of reorganizing so that people are a little more spread out and they've got room without costing a great amount. But part of that is to see that the stage gets that air conditioning. The stage unit would also have a high heat option. So all of these have a regular heat that you can turn it on to heat, but there's a high heat so that if it's very cold outside, it'll still produce heat in that area. There was some concern from the person that currently works in there that the heating wasn't working, but she hadn't been through a season with the new boiler in place. So, and the HVAC company that put the new boiler in says there's nothing wrong with the heat up there. So we think we're going to be good. And utilizing that space would be really helpful because it is just a lot of space that's underutilized currently.
Mini splits do both heating and cooling.
Correct. So, so that's what. There is no mini split there now in the stage. So that's what this is about. It's about $7,000, and that's one of the things that I'm recommending the board do this year out of this year money.
So if they take it out of this year's, the 15,000 is reduced by 7,000?
I would say yes. Yeah. Yep. And then there is no set plan in terms of what the cost would be for a reorg. We're not talking about anything extensive. We're talking about, sort of Les Nessman, like, if you understand the reference, areas. So then senior center maintenance, these are the costs associated with the senior center itself. The reason why it's going down is because there were monies encumbered from last year that were for, I'll have to think about it. It'll come to me. But in any event, we had encumbered money from the prior year for the generator installation. And that was for both. We had the generator. I had written a grant years ago for a generator for the old PD. And you can't sell them once you have a FEMA grant like that, but you can use them in other situations. And that is a designated shelter in the event of an emergency, the senior center. So the costs that were encumbered from 23 into 24 that were added to the budget of $19,847 was for the installation of the gas line and the pad and the electrical to get that all hooked up. And it is now installed there. So the reduction that you see there is really specific to the fact that there is no encumbered money for a project at that location. On page 4, at the top of page 4, these are the janitorial supplies I talked about. These get allocated, generally speaking, once a year to the other budget lines, and they're purchased by DPW and then allocated out. And once I get the allocation from DPW, you'll see the unaudited expense for 24, and we're budgeting the same for 25. I do believe we're using a little less paper goods than we have in the past in town hall and DPW, and maybe a little bit more in the PD. These are our figures for 2025 for workers' comp, property liability, and unemployment insurance. Again, these we really don't have a great deal of control over. We are going through a program now whereby we could save some money off of our premium on property liability once we complete certain tasks, going through all the buildings and identifying safety and infrastructure improvements that are needed, and then addressing those. So, and then Lakes Region Mutual Fire Aid. The Chief Sitar is the Board of Selectmen's representative to Lakes Region Mutual Fire Aid. And this is paid directly from the town of Tilton as opposed to being paid from the fire district. And as you'll see when you get your tax bill, Tilton comprises about 65% of the bill for the fire district. So were this money at the fire district, we would be paying more than the $58,000 that we pay directly to them. And this apportionment is done by the fire board, and Chief Sitar could talk more about that if you want to learn more about the cost of that. But that's for their dispatch center and the capital improvements to their radios and their towers and everything else that keeps us safe. In terms of town clerk tax collector, so this is there's a 4% wage increase budgeted here, which will be $3,420 over her current salary. And the reason why you see that it shows a 4.9% increase is because that 0.9 comprises half a year of the other costs that are associated with that for retirement and taxes. The deputy town clerk tax collector, you can see where she's budgeted. So again, this is her current salary at the $55,120, and the merit, the 4% merit that's budgeted for that line is in that merit line. So that's how all these will work as you go through this. She did receive a 6% increase this past year. The town clerk, yes.
Isn't the salary of the town clerk tax collector being an elected position, doesn't that have to go through town hall to get an increase?
Well, town meeting, right. So, and that's why it's split out here for the increase as opposed to being in the merit line. So,
That's already been.
So in other words, if townspeople said, hey, we don't want to pay that $3,420, you would see that she would receive her current salary of, the $73,380.
So this is in anticipation of them saying it, of the town saying yes.
I'm sorry. Yeah, I misspoke. The $69,960 is her current salary.
Right.
What you're seeing there, the increase of the $3,420 is the $73,880. So if townspeople said, no, we're not going to do that, then it'd be the $73,380. And every year we kind of go through should the selectmen vote on it? They discuss this. Should the budget committee? How does this get passed through to the townspeople? But Selectman Dawson years ago determined, based on her reading of the RSAs, that this was a more proper way to handle this, and that the town clerk tax collector should, at town meeting, get up and discuss why she is entitled to this increase. And if you recall, in past years, there were times when Cindy Reinhardt was the town clerk tax collector. One year, she presented a case for a 7% increase, and she received it. Another time, she put in for, I think, a 6 or 7% increase, and it was halved. So it really depends. But if you think about any of the other elected officials in here, like the selectmen, for the selectmen to increase their salary, they would have to do the same thing. And if you remember the last time it was increased from $300 to $400, there was someone that made that motion at town meeting, said, I move to do this and here's why. And then people voted on it and amended the budget. So you're absolutely correct in terms of that elected position. Office supplies, you can see how these are broken out. They've got certain motor vehicle online resources that they require, the dump stickers that they buy, tax bills that they have to purchase the blanks for. I've made recommendations of things that they could do maybe to save some money there, but it's not a significant some significant savings. The dog tags, certified mailers that they have to do are really based off of how many liens and deeded certifieds they have to send, or for the dogs. Other office items, and then the folder and stuffer maintenance. So we have a machine that's about, I think it's about 8 or 9 years old at this point. And for all the tax bills, those are run through that, and it folds the tax bill and it stuffs the envelope, and boom, it's ready to go through the postage machine. And the maintenance on that, and there are a lot of moving parts, is about $711. The postage, they've increased that. That's again partly because of the increase in postage, and then also the amount of things that they are sending out. Every month they send out all the motor vehicle renewals, and then this year with the election, they've had a number of absentee ballots and other election-related things that they've had to mail. And then, of course, the tax bills, that's the big one. So you're going to see that $5,000, that's the unaudited expense for this year. You'll see that pressing right up to the budgeted amount, or probably exceeding it by the end of this year. Their training, they were unable to make use of some of the conferences this year, in particular for the deputy, so that the deputy could be certified in one of these areas. So they do plan to take advantage of this next year. And I think, I believe the reason was there was it was a family matter, and that also because of the elections, there were some issues where they couldn't take advantage of, and these are like week-long courses that they've got to take for these. So they are planning on doing that in 25. Government reimbursements, these are essentially our portion that we have to budget for, that we have to remit to the state for vital records, and then also dog licenses. And then election preparation. These are specific things that the town clerk tax collector pays for. You would be shocked at what we pay for the coding of these little SD cards, essentially an SD card that goes into the voting machine, the scanner. It's just outrageous. There's one company that the state has do it, at least currently, and they have a complete monopoly on it, and you pay what they tell you to pay. That's the way it works. So this also covers ballot printing, meeting minutes from the town meeting, which can sometimes be lengthy and expensive to have transcribed. And again, you can see the change because of the one election. And then also there's deed research. So as you go through the tax year, for those tax bills that weren't paid for the prior year in April, they're doing the deed research, and then those will be liened at some point during the year. And then for those liens that have hit the 3-year mark, they'll be researching those for deeds as well. And she has a fantastic company that she's working with that's relatively local and is very reasonable in doing that. In terms of the finance budget at the bottom of page 4, so you see the salary for the budget committee. And we budget based on the number of seats, because at any point in time, all those seats can be filled. So right now we have 6. We could have 7, although Selectman Jessman isn't paid. Any of the selectmen aren't paid for an ex officio seat on a board unless it's specifically approved by the Board of Selectmen, in the case where someone was a committee member prior to that. And there's one person that's been on a board for 40 years, and they did allow for him to continue to receive his stipend for that. But other than that, we try to budget for the total amount. There could be an alternate as well. Then you see the budget committee expense. We haven't spent anything as yet this year. And that would be for, say, if somebody went to one of the budget conferences or the workshop that's held, That's usually $70 to $90, depending upon whether you attend in person or online. And then our audit. So the audit includes both the costs of our auditor, as well as we pay an actuarial for every 2 years, and it's good for a 2-year period, and that's split up over each of those 2 years. But that's required for other post-employment benefits, which is important to have a clean audit for borrowing any kind of money. Not all municipalities do. The fire district, as I'm a treasurer for the fire district, they just were written up for not having this. And yet, if they ever get to the point where they're going to go borrow for bonding for a new station or improvements to a station, that's going to be a point where there's going to be some hand wringing on by the people that are financial statement readers, looking at it saying, oh, why aren't you doing this? There's not, it's important to have a clean audit. And I'm fortunate to say we've been, very good about maintaining clean audits. We haven't had any negative, any kind of audit points for the town. And this, just so you understand, it relates to other post-employment benefits. That really means that if someone has retired and decides that they want to continue to pay for the town's insurance at 100% their cost, 100% their cost, but because they're on our insurance, it affects our rating for the premiums. Now, I can tell you, I don't think it makes, knowing the number of people that we have that are still paying full price for our health insurance, which is not inexpensive. They get no subsidies from the town of any kind. It can't possibly have a great deal of impact, but that's what this does. The actuarial goes through and looks at the ages, and they also go through the process of looking at the employees and the employee ages, and projecting out and extrapolating those post-employment benefit costs for the town. And it's really, it's something that every audit has, and that you can see in there. So in any case, that's part of that contract. And I am actually low. I just got the new pricing for that. It's now $1,925 per year. So I'm not going to change that. I don't anticipate that's going to have to be increased. I'll find another area that I can make up for that. My salary follows by the treasurer, the deputy treasurer, and then supplies. One change this year is, if you're familiar, and I'm sure Christine, we've got to all do electronic filing for things that we used to send out paper copies for, 1099s and that sort of thing. And there's pretty significant penalties if you don't do it. So in any case, there are subscriptions that you can you buy that allow you to do this. And so where we're not spending the money on the forms necessarily, we're now spending as much or maybe a little bit more on these subscription services.
Who does that, the payroll company or?
No, last year we used Yearly, and which was recommended by Health Trust. And this year, I haven't chosen it yet, but I'm thinking we're going to use 1099 Tax. I think it's called 1099tax.com.
I'll let you know what I'm using. I don't know because I don't do it, but.
Okay. That one's a pretty reasonable one. That's pretty low cost. Yearly is probably on the higher side, but it was recommended by Health Trust because we also have to send out all the health related statements electronically as well, and send that to the federal government that way. So,
You ever thought of applying to be an e-filer for 1099s as a town? Because you just get a TCC number and
we did start that this last year. The problem arises with the staffing challenges we had this last year.
Okay.
So once we have a stable staff, we can have those, because you have to associate certain positions with certain responsibilities in there to go through that and get that. And we just did not have the staff last year.
Your payroll software also has to be able to produce that report that they accept if you become an e-filer.
Right.
It's a specific way it comes out. so.
Right. So in any event, I'm anticipating, while these aren't necessarily going to be printed things, these are going to be electronic, but still it's going to be about the same cost as you see here. In addition, in terms of printing, I use a micro cartridge. We use micro cartridges for our checks, that sort of thing. And those are a little bit more expensive. But other than that, you can see the conferences. And again, this year, when a lot of things were going on, I couldn't take advantage of them because I was serving as the interim town administrator for a good portion of the time when these other things were taking place. And so that was that. But I hope to in the future. In terms of debt, short-term interest, so here's where you can see where our rates used to be for borrowing. So in 22, we had a 1% rate. These are tax-exempt rates, municipal rates for borrowing. So in general, we borrow between $2.5 million and $3 million a year. And it's not done all at the same time necessarily. We draw down when we need it. We pay it back as we have it. In 23, we locked in early in 22, at the end of 22, when most people had rates higher than 3.75%. We were locked in because we were able to lock in up to 60 days prior to the beginning of the year. This year, as I said before, it's going to be just the opposite. We'll probably be at the end of February before I'm panicked and locking in before we're out of money, before those first tax bills come out. So to try to affect a lower rate. But this year we were at 5.25%. I am having to borrow presently, but that number that you see there has served us up through this point in the year. But part of the reason for that is that we have a healthy fund balance. So we've been able to manage the cash in such a way that that we've been able to get by, and this is with the state owing us money on Caliph Hill expenses that will eventually recoup the full amount of those expenses that we've expended. But for 2025, again, it's difficult to say what we're going to spend, but I feel comfortable enough in bringing that down significantly. I am anticipating that the board is going to use a significant portion of fund balance to reduce the rate this year, which will be very soon. And that will, of course, affect our cash flow to some degree. And because of that, we are going to spend more money than we did this year. And hopefully it'll be at a lower interest rate. One can only hope. But
Won't know till after the elections.
we will not know. And honestly, I really do believe we're going to be in February by the time I get something locked. In terms of the long-term debt, our two items of debt are the sewer debt, which was originally done through USDA and then refinanced through the Municipal Bond Bank. And then the police station, which is at 1.9%. And that was done through Franklin Savings Bank. And you can see this is just based on the amortization schedules. They fluctuate from year to year. And you'll see that our expense for, we have one more bond payment coming at the end of this year in interest.
Do we only pay interest?
No. There are two payments for each during the year. And it's principal and interest, but there's one that is primarily interest at the end of the year. So outside of that, in terms of information technology, again, the salary, that's me. The hardware, this is the upgrades for Windows 11. This is replacing with refurbished systems. I've been able to buy really great Dell systems for about $200 a piece with Windows 11 Pro. 16 gigs of RAM, 500 gig disks that are i5 processors, 8th generation, so they run Windows 11. And for $200, it's just a fantastic price, and I hope I can finish finish out the systems that I need to replace with those. They're really nice little. They're very small, but they're great systems. The other thing is I've also received equipment from the federal government through the courts, and as you know, in the past, where we've been able to take advantage of that free stuff, we have. In fact, today we just got 2 big filing cabinets. Last week I got 2 laptops that will be serving down in DPW for their Windows 11 systems. And we got almost a brand new HP color printer so that the land use office can print color upstairs and they don't have to go downstairs to the color copier all the time. And all free. So whenever those come out, you got to grab them right when they come out because they go quick. And sometimes you get a piece of junk, but very rarely. It's remarkable. That HP printer, there's only 3,700 prints done on it since it was new. It's like brand new. I can't believe it. But in any case, so then we have software. So the PD software. So one thing about this is that Belknap County has been going through a huge IT project where they are incorporating all of the agencies within their realm onto their servers, and essentially our application software that we use in the PD will be housed there and backed up on our servers in the PD. So we can access our data either on our local system but we would update the system that's at Belknap County. The idea for that is that then we can take full advantage of dispatching that's done 24/7 at Belknap County. When they pull a call, the call is available within the Tilton data area. And so in any event, the idea here was that we were going to have less license fees because we're not going to have to pay for as much for the server portion that we currently pay out of our licensing for this application software. But the county they were originally going to bring all 13 of their agencies up on one day during the year. And I used to do this for a living in my past life, and I can tell you that's generally unadvisable unless you've spent a year preparing for that. And so in any case, that was back in May, and they're still working on their plans and how they're going to get people up. So enough said on that. So at some point in time, we may see some reduction. I haven't been able to pin anybody down on if that's 5%, 10%, or more, but I'm thinking more and more it's going to be negligible. It may be not an increase. It may be a 5% decrease over what we're paying now. Outside of that, we have a lot of security related components. Our firewalls have to be maintained and updated, and new firewalls purchased.
A consultant for that?
We do. Yep. Because the servers and firewalls have to have somebody other than myself that can maintain this stuff and step in. And I rely on them very heavily. We went through an FBI audit was it last year? Feels like last year. I think it was the beginning of last year, where generally speaking, the FBI audit is something you provide them. Here's our network diagram. Here's how it's all set up. Here's how we adhere to all these different components and of their requirements. And then that's that. They actually sent 8 FBI agents from West Virginia into New Hampshire and audited all these, not every agency, but a number of agencies, or maybe there were four agents that did 8 agencies. Maybe that's what it was, but we were one of them. And I can tell you just as an anecdote, no humor on the part of the agent, which was disconcerting to say the least. But we did very well. We had a couple of things that we had to tighten up, but overall it was a really good experience, and learned a lot in the process. But we spending money in this area is something we're going to continue to do, and it's going to cost us more money because there just isn't any other means. If you fail this FBI audit, they have the ability to prevent you from accessing CJIS information, which is Criminal Justice Information System, their nationwide network. So you would be without the ability to look up anything about somebody, and that's severely limiting, obviously. We have, in the past, we've suffered hacking, we've suffered ransomware, we've suffered phishing back before I was involved, where the Bank of Italy, there was a scheme, there was something going on with that. And everything I get on a daily basis, it's all about security, security, security. And we're not spending enough in that area. But in any event, this $4,000 is primarily for the components that we have on the desktops, as well as upgrades and other things that we maintain for both hardware and software security for our networks. In addition, the assessing, tax collection, clerk software, accounting software, these are all of the application softwares used by different departments. And then there's a few other utilities that we maintain. So there was generally the application softwares are the area that we see the increase year after year. The utilities aren't generally that much. In terms of services, we have 4 copiers that we maintain. One of which is covered under a service agreement, the rest are time and materials. And then the consultant for firewall servers, and they do more than that if required. But we set aside that money. It does not expire. And if we use it, we use it. If we don't, it carries over. The alert service, that's our alert Tilton service. Our office apps, these are all of our online apps, from everything from our cloud storage to email, our drive storage, and other things that we use for collaboration and communication. Online meetings, that's what we're currently using right now, the GoToMeeting, which is one of the least expensive for us. And then we have a signature program that's used by the Board of Selectmen for signing when they're able to get in person to sign things. Outside of that, in terms of communications, we have a number of phones. This is the Verizon Wireless. This is all primarily at the PD. There's one phone that is on that plan that is not at the PD, and that's paid for by the senior center for the bus. But other than that, all that is the MDTs, the mobile data terminals that they use in the vehicles. They all have, basically an internet connection for access for that criminal justice information. And then there are a number of other devices that they utilize for surveillance and investigations and things like that. So that's the cost there. The fiber access for internet and phone, you can see there, we are currently on a contract with Consolidated, but now that we have competition in town for fiber, I'm hoping that I'm going to be able to renegotiate a lower price as well as better service. Faster service, but we've been very fortunate. It's been rock solid. And then we do have some other communication services that we pay for out of this on an annual basis.
What's the competition to Consolidate?
So there's a couple.
Xfinity
Comcast is one, but also there are third-party resellers of fiber. So they buy up blocks of, say, from Consolidated, and then they offer, like First Light is one that is throughout this area in New Hampshire now. And there are others, but in the past when I've priced those out, there hasn't been any real price advantage to it. And then you're working with a third party to the original provider, and the PD has to have rock solid, connection, because all of our communications, apart from radio communications, are done through that. And even then, we have equipment on the Shed Road Tower of the fire tower. That's one of the repeaters that we put in a little over a year ago, or a year and a half ago, I should say. And then we have a repeater, a secondary repeater, used to be our primary repeater, on Belknap Mountain. And on Belknap Mountain, the communications aren't what you would think from our tower to that tower and then out. We actually maintain a very small fiber line that goes up along with other fiber lines for the other agencies that are on Belknap Tower. You communicate via fiber, and it's a real small line, but that's how the radio communications go out and out through that repeater. So it's, and then also I would like to see, if I'm successful, I want to also get our Riverfront Park and Senior Center on fiber, as well as DPW. Currently, all three are on Breeze Line through cable modems. We do get a $50 discount through our contract, our municipal agreement, for Breeze Line being in town. But if you were to look at the details of it, it really doesn't amount to much. It's not like $50 off what a residence would pay. So in any event, my goal is to get to that. But we do utilize our surveillance through all those. I have to tamp down the resolution on some of those cameras, but in order to make use of those. Then let's see, on page 6, moving along. So we've got other supplies. These are toners, drums, other things for printers, wherever possible, with the one exception, which is in the town clerk tax collector's office. And I've standardized on a certain type of HP printer, which I got for free at one point, and then I bought 2 other used ones. So we can standardize on the same toner. But the only genuine toners I buy one set, so they have a genuine toner at the clerk's office, so they can print titles and or other important documents. Otherwise, the secondary printer there has remanufactured toner, as do all the other printers. So we really try to save wherever we can, because those HP toners can be pretty expensive. But that's the kind of stuff we do with the toners. Try to minimize the cost there wherever possible. So in land use, so here you see the flip-flopping of the technician, which is the full-time person, versus the part-time. So the coordinator, which is Pat Constantino, her work week is a 34-hour work week, and so she is part-time, no benefits from no health or retirement benefits. And then the land use technician, that support position, which used to be 16 hours a week, which is why you see such a disparity between the 24 budget and 25 budget. Used to be 16 hours a week and now is a full-time position. The other thing you have to keep in mind as you look through the unaudited expense for this year, at one point in time, we were down to one person within the land use department for a short time, and it was there had been a lot of change there. And so when we did start to rebuild that, it required bringing in people to train that had worked here before. And so there were a lot of unusual expenses outside of a normal budget year. So that's why that was so largely overspent for this year, because you're also seeing the full-time position being paid out of that line that was originally budgeted as a 16-hour line. So outside of that, equipment and supplies, I expect that to drop back to normal level. There were a number of things that were needed with the new staff. I do still expect they're going to expend their miscellaneous and recording fees, and they may overexpend these by the end of the year, but I don't expect it to be significant. Postage, again, that's up, as I referenced earlier. most of the board and committees that the land use department deals with which is planning and zoning. But the Board of Selectmen had also required the land use department to send out all the packets to conservation as well. So these are the applications, but a number of people that are on these boards and committees require packets in the mail, and sometimes they can be extensive and bulky. So they've increased that cost. We did reduce the advertising line, as mentioned earlier, because now we are not required to advertise in the paper as before. Education, I do expect, again, we had hardly any staff in place for a good portion of this year, which is why that wasn't spent this year. I do expect it to be fully spent next year. The master plan update, we always put in $1 for this in anticipation that there may be money spent. There is grant money available for this through Lakes Region Planning, and I would think if there was another move to update the master plan, that we would be seeking grant money to pay for that, and this is where you would see that expense. Professional consulting, this is the expense this year, and the increase for 2025 is due to the need for additional legal and engineering support for the department. See, Christine, I know you're familiar,
Board, yeah.
and other people may be familiar. There's just because of the complexity of the cases that we've had and some other issues, has required the need for legal assistance in some cases and additional engineering, and so that's where this is budgeted. The salary for the planning and zoning boards follow, and then the building inspector, who's part-time, no benefits, 12 hours a week is budgeted there. The land use vehicle costs, so in 2024, we purchased a 2016 police interceptor with relatively low miles and low use for that vehicle, and that's been serving well. Our former vehicle, which had been donated to the town, did not pass inspection, was going to require a significant amount of work to bring it up to pass inspection. So that's why the overexpended item this year. We do put in $2,500 a year, keeping in mind it is a 2016. It is going to require maintenance at some point. It is used 3 days a week, but it's in relatively good shape from what I understand. But if it needs tires or oil changes, other things, those are going to be paid out of that line. The Conservation Commission, you can see the detail that they have supplied for the Conservation Commission. They're going up slightly, and I don't recall, I think it was because of an increase in brush removal perhaps, but they have dues, they have their stipends, they pay the secretary, they have workshops, and then they do pay for maintenance at Salmon Run, which is the conservation area over here across from where the old PD was. And then they do have monies budgeted for professional assistants or consultants, and then miscellaneous expenses. In terms of economic development, that's come down considerably in the last few years, and it's being budgeted at $2,500.
Before we go
Oh, yes.
further,
Mhm.
I noticed we budget 8,200. We only spent 18. They're requesting 8,500 this year, or for next year. And are they going to spend that 8,200 this year? Do they have things coming up that would require 8,500?
Right. So in November, all the, in fact, I think it's either this. Next week is going to be our first pay period. I think that's when we're doing all the board and commission payments. So the 3,600 would be paid then. The secretarial is paid as they submit the invoices for that. That's generally, they group them, so it's usually by quarter. So I would expect there would be more there. I can't recall. I think there was work to be done at Salmon Run, but I think
The brush removal is quite a bit of money.
yeah, and I think that has been contracted, but I don't believe it's been done yet. But I think the person was,
They did some down at the
The park. Riverfront.
Salmon Run.
Oh, they did some.
The Conservation Commission doesn't do the park.
No.
Separate thing.
Right.
But they had invasive species taken out down along near the guardrails and stuff.
Mhm.
It was all this crap in where the old dam used to be,
Mhm.
and they paid to have that professionally removed. So Japanese knotweed or something like very invasive. If you don't take it out now, next year it'll be halfway up the river. That kind of thing.
well, so it's a good question. I would expect that they generally don't spend the professional assistance amount. And I'd have to go back and look at prior years, but I think in general, they've been about 60 to 70% spent for the year,
Okay.
with the provision that they could have other things that come up during the year. And, you got to,
Selectmen would have to find money to help them out. I mean, it's a bottom line budget, and I don't want to raise.
Right.
I want to raise every penny we need, and nothing that we don't.
right. And keeping in mind that these are, plans at the beginning of the year.
Yeah.
That sometimes it comes to fruition, sometimes it doesn't. But that would be a good question for the Conservation Commission, which, Bill,
I'm not on that one.
you're not. Oh, okay. I thought for some reason you were. I don't think anyone is here. Okay.
We can vote to reduce it when we go voting on this anyways.
Oh, I know
Or-
we can.
Yeah.
I've got a star check
And-
mark.
I got to start.
And also we could get an explanation from them if you'd like.
Yes,
If they
please.
need it, okie dokie, we can discuss it when they come round.
Right. Outside of that, the economic development. So this has really become a beautification line. This is for replacing the flags, putting in flowers, holiday decorations, things to attract people downtown and that sort of thing. So it is
Not spent.
well.
At one point, there was an effort to get regular meetings with downtown people and to create more events downtown, and that kind of died when.
Well, I was
Gene
on
left,
that
but-
committee, Bill, and it just didn't have legs.
Well, I
We
mean,
couldn't get people to come to the meetings consistently.
I wasn't invited consistently. I mean, I would have
You
been
could
there.
be invited. You could be on that committee.
Sure. Well, I know Judy wanted to be on that too, and
I never heard anything about
yeah,
Judy being involved in that.
well, that's because we're still trying to get summer fair back.
Well, that's where
as a
that money
town
would
event.
come from, is from that line.
Right.
Exactly.
Right.
Yeah, and this, you have to keep in mind there was a lot of change this year,
Right.
where the impetus for some of these things would have come from originally. So,
Okay.
but in any case, that's in general. That's how that line is to be used for beautification. Health and welfare. So this is the salary of the health officer. This is part-time based on 32 hours per week. This was put in place in 2012 when the housing standards ordinance was passed. The one change this past year has been that the Board of Selectmen wanted to hire a person, or wanted the position of zoning enforcement increased. And historically, it had been part of the land use coordinator's position. So the board created a position of health officer, zoning code enforcement officer. So if you will, a compliance officer of health and zoning. There had been some discussion about whether this is a reactive or proactive kind of position, but essentially this is the only money that's been allocated for that position. So at some point in time, the health officer, and we've been looking for someone to fill this position because the current person filling that position has tried to resign twice. But without anyone to fill the position, she's been doing that. So in any event, that's just a little update on that. And something to keep in mind that the people that we did interview for this position, at some point in time, if the board or the town ever deems that this is an important position to have full time, it would cost about $68,000 more than this budgeted amount per year for that position for all the costs associated with it. Moving on the top of page 7. So this is the health officer miscellaneous expense. This is for their water tests. If they have to send things out, or their supplies, rubber gloves, batteries. They take pictures. They take samples. And sometimes it requires mileage to transport something if it's volatile to be tested. There hasn't been a lot of expense in there because the activity has been relatively low in terms of housing inspections, because most tenants don't want to call the health officer to come in, because if they do, they're worried their landlord is going to try to get rid of them. And if they do, the landlord will be able to raise the rent, and they'll be out looking for a place that they won't be able to afford. So I think I've somewhat characterized it the way the health officer would, but so there's been a little less activity this year, but it is possible that they would have some expense there. Animal control, this used to be a $5,000 item that when we went to the new contract with the Franklin Animal Shelter, we negotiated $100 per event, and there have been no events required. So we do have to budget in the event that there are dogs that will be picked up and housed there. But we've been fortunate. We haven't had to pay anything as yet. Salary for the Senior Executive Committee. This is the executive committee that runs the Senior Center, as well as oversees the donations that are made to the Senior Center, and also the bus driver program. And so this is for the stipends for both the Senior Executive Committee, which Deborah is on, as well as for the bus driver stipends on an annual basis.
How many are on that committee?
5? And there
I
are
think 5.
And one
I don't know if
alternate.
they're all full, but
Yeah,
and then
and
there-
one alternate. They're
there are
full.
3 drivers currently.
They all get paid at the end of the year.
Is that me? Sorry.
Is that 0? They all get paid at the end of the year?
Yes. Yeah, and those will be paid out along with all the other volunteer stipends, either this next pay period or the pay period following. It's before Thanksgiving. Then we have the welfare director of welfare salary. That's based on 20 hours a week, and then her administrative expense, and this is essentially for reimbursement of her own cell phone that she maintains on a separate plan. And then there's some other incidental expenses that she has during the year. Generally speaking, it's postage or some other office supplies, which is why you see it slightly overspent this year. And then the welfare general assistance line, while it's only been spent about 52% so far this year, she would explain that there's been a great deal of change in terms of the amount of support and grant money and other support services available through other agencies. So she's anticipating there's going to be more reliance on the town, which has a legal obligation in certain circumstances. And so therefore she increased that by $10,000.
Is she expecting us some more expenses for this year?
She is. And you see this sort of ebb and flow. It generally follows the winter months, and then there's rental assistance during the year periodically. And then at the end of the year, again, you're looking at either heat assistance and or rental assistance. And
or food.
Or food.
I will say that Heather has done wonderful things with her budget. I know that in Laconia, they've increased their budget twice this year to cover shortfalls. No, the city of Laconia.
Oh, okay.
They've had to increase that line 2 times, and they're looking at a third because of the need. and maybe the expertise of whoever they have doing it, because Heather's a hustler. I've
Yeah.
seen her do it, and she doesn't just pay for motels or
Right.
they come in, she gives them money or this and that kind of thing. She calls and she hustles shelters and she buys bus tickets occasionally.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
I have family in Florida. It's like let me
Yeah.
hook you
Let me
up.
help you get there.
Yeah, right.
So in any event, I would say that yes, she's anticipating more expense this year. The other thing, something to look at, and I don't know, there are certain things that you can set up capital reserves for. If there were the ability, and I just don't know off the top of my head, I'd have to check with DRA, but this could be something that if it's set at say 25,000 a year, and if there's money left over at the end of the year, that if you have a warrant article that allows for town meeting each year to take whatever unexpended amount and put it into the capital reserve, so that as you have those extraordinary expenses, that all of a sudden there's a real drain on the system. It's kind of like special education for schools. They're required by law to spend a certain amount, or to have that function, and yet, how do you plan for that? You have no idea what's coming in the door the next day, sort of thing. So this is one of these that it would be nice to find a way to sort of modulate this, but I can tell you, historically speaking, about 10 years ago, this was a $50,000 line, and it's come down pretty much each year. But again, there's less support services available. So moving on to Public Works, you see the personnel there. We have 6 full-time personnel and 1 part-time position budgeted. So there's 1 director, 5 full-time crew, 1 of which is open currently, and then 1 part-time position. So if you know of someone that has a CDL or wants to be a truck driver or laborer, have them contact the DPW director. Once again, the part-time position is budgeted as a 10-hour per week to assist with the transfer station. Otherwise, we'd have to have 2 people there paying overtime for that position, for that activity. And so in any case, you can see originally we had a change in, we were without a director when this budget was put in place. So there is a reduction there based on the hiring that we did during the year out of the crew. In addition, the crew changed because of the composition of the crew. There was the move up to director and then hiring, replacing. So you can see the change there was negligible year to year. Overtime, we're probably going to overspend overtime this year, depending upon how many storms we have between now and the end of the year. But that also was generated earlier in the year because of staffing levels and what we were dealing with at the beginning of the year due to the staffing. The merit, you can see there's 6 employees in that merit portion. Part-time wages, that's the 10-hour per week. Then you can see all the taxes, insurance, retirement. Again, this reduces, the retirement goes down slightly in July, and then health insurance, dental, so on and so forth. And again, we really don't have any control over the health insurance because there can be qualifying events during the year. It just so happens that the composition at the Public Works Garage, that's what the type of plans that they're on, and some have buyouts. So that's why the significant reduction there. Equipment maintenance and repair. This has been increased because we have to send out all of our equipment for repair. We currently have a 2015 Ford 550 that the turbo is starting to act up, and we just recently did the other 550 turbo to the cost of almost $6,000 about within the last year. So, in any event, this is this is the reality. The selectmen did enter into a mutual agreement with the town of Northfield for access to their mechanic. So those rates are prescribed within the agreement of what we pay per hour, and we supply the parts. But still, we're anticipating that there's going to be a lot more expense there.
Why did the office supplies go up so much?
The director and I had looked at that, and I think there were some things that were miscategorized earlier in the year. And I have a stack of about 20 things sitting on my desk that I haven't gone through yet, that I have a feeling there were some safety items that were charged to that should not have been charged to that line.
So that number is subject to change?
I think it's, I believe it will. That was one of the ones that we had gone through. And some of this was just experience, and learning the system, where we charge things. But in any event, I'm going to flag that too, because that's going to be something I'm going to be working on tomorrow. Outside of that, the equipment supplies that they're anticipating they're going to spend a little bit more money on this next year, and they will probably spend that entire budget this year. That's everything from filters and acetylene tanks and everything else that they use in the operation of the DPW. Advertising is just $1, and I should say $0. That's correct, because that's one of the lines that we're going to eliminate out of the budget, which can just be paid for out of the miscellaneous expense. The other one, as we get down to it, you'll see is radio communications. But on the top of page 8, this is the equipment rental. So generally there's, and I believe we may be able to have this number for 2025, because in talking with the director, they think they can affect just one rental of the lift this year, so that may be able to be reduced to $1,500. And he was looking into that, so I'll be sure to update you on that. There you see the miscellaneous expense. That's everything from other supplies that they need. When they have department meetings, sometimes they'll have some refreshments, but generally speaking, it's all those other little things that don't fall very well into any set category.
They also buy coffee during plow season.
They do. Yep.
Boxes of Joe and donuts. Yep. So, they come in, they drink coffee and go out again.
Yep. They warm up and go out. Yep. Electricity, this is the same as you saw before. This was increased for 24 because of the 3-phase power, but the 3-phase power for the recycling and the baler, was just put in recently, so we haven't seen the full effect of that cost yet. It was originally scheduled to be done earlier in the year, but the electrician that was contracted for it, that started it, was working on that big lake project, and got to us when they got to us. So in any event, the heat, I expect that to come in right around budget for this year, and I would think it would be the same for the following. And just as a note, at the time when we locked in the electric at this really reduced rate, we also had locked in for it was also at the same time through 26 rates on the LP gas, or the natural gas, I should say. And so we have excellent rate on that as well. I just hope, we'll be able to lock in at something that's going to be equally advantageous down the road. Building supplies. So there are a number of things, when you get new staff, they notice things that have to be done. Part of that, program I mentioned, where we're trying to reduce the cost of our property liability and save money there, has required spending money to make changes in the building for safety and other things. So we've had to spend some money. Some of this has been done through building supplies. Some of this has been spent on other needed items within the recycling building. But most of that is for the primary building. You see the water expense there, building repairs. So this is $15,000. This is what was originally budgeted this year for a septic design. And this relates back to the fact that when we built that building in 2000 or thereabouts, the state provided us with a permit for a holding tank only for 2 years, and the town was required to put in some other type of system. So no one really knew this until the guy that had been involved in this happened to show up at the DPW one day and say, hey, you need to get yourself a septic design. But the reality is it's not the state requiring us to do this, and I think it's been determined that there is a possibility of connecting into sewer, but it would require going underneath Route 3 and then going up towards Tractor Supply. There's a connection that comes past towards the funeral home. I don't believe it goes as far as that, but what we're looking into the cost of that now. But in all likelihood, I think this, for the likelihood of seeing anything done in 2025, is probably low. Would be my personal opinion, and I think we could probably shave $12,000 out of that line by just continuing to pump the holding tank until there is a concrete plan. But we are working on what it would cost to connect to sewer, as that seems to be the only viable alternative at this point.
Have you discussed with the WRBP connecting to the sewer?
Well,
you're a
yeah,
customer. We're
right,
the owner of the WRBP.
right.
It's
So
got to go right down Route 3.
It doesn't.
it's not right where you would like it to be. So we would. I don't know exactly where it comes,
Yeah.
but we're looking at the length. And of course, there are other opportunities because as you put that sewer pipe in, there may be others that want to connect. Other businesses or residences along there that may want to connect in and could generate revenue, say for the sewer commission, or maybe somewhat offset if the sewer commission saw that there was revenue opportunities, they might offset part of the cost.
And I asked that in that instead of hiring out contractors to do the work and get bids on it, we are already the owners of the WRBP partial owners, and they could probably do the work and charge it back to us is what I'm asking. Is the possibility of something along those lines. They have the equipment.
My understanding is
you're going to pay them to do the connection anyway.
The WRBP does not run right down Route 3 in that location. There was a bond issue last year about the sewer district.
Yeah.
Putting in a pipe so that I don't know exactly where their
I'm
pipe
saying whatever the needs are.
Yeah.
Going through them to do it.
Yeah.
Instead of hiring a private company to do it, we own the company that does the sewer.
Right. Now I made a note.
By the state technically, but
yeah,
we are the part owner of it.
I made a note. I'll see, and maybe when the sewer representative comes, we can also talk about that. But there was as Joe said, there was a bond warrant article. I think it was 2019 for $2 million that was going to go up partway Clark Road and then come all the way down Route 3 to connect up with another part of the sewer. So, but that failed. Right, that failed.
Yeah, that sewer goes right down Clark, right down Route 3. It's got to.
So
on Caleb Hill, and we have sewer. It has to go down Clark. Gravity goes down.
Right. Yep. So in any event, uniforms. These are the highway uniforms. The additional amount is anticipating replacing that one open position and the safety equipment for that. Gas, diesel. This is always hard to determine. Right now, they're great prices. We don't pay for any taxes. For any of the fuel taxes, we have a special, set up for that. And we've spent very little this year, but we can go through when they're running the diesel trucks, and if there's a lot of snowstorms, they go through a lot of fuel very quickly. So I wouldn't recommend lowering that line. Radio communications, that line we want to eliminate just because there's rarely any activity there, and we're all set with radios. And if we did have any kind of reprogramming we had to do, we would charge it to the miscellaneous expense line. And equipment purchases, this is one of the areas that we're looking that we'll probably be able to reduce by $1,000. The board approved or suggested that the DPW purchase the compactor this year, and in fact, where it's normally $1,500, they're able to get it for $1,000. So we'll probably be reducing that request by $1,000, depending upon if that was the quote. We have to see how it turns out, but I'm anticipating at least $1,000 there. In terms of training, there was $200 added for herbicide training. And this is so that they can go through various classes and then be able to deal with certain invasive species. Winter sand and salt, we're looking at $81.40 a ton on average, and about 675 tons total per year. And of course, that all depends, on what we get through the weather. Road materials, that's where we purchase gravel, ledge pack, asphalt, other materials, and the compactor is used when there are repairs made to roads. They use that compactor for either gravel or asphalt.
In an earlier line, we were talking about the fact that we wouldn't want to lower the gas diesel because, it was a light winter, and we shouldn't figure that this year should be a light winter. Why would salt and sand be at a 77% burn rate when fuel is only at a 40-something% burn rate?
So well, that's good. That's an excellent question. I know the sand and salt was used a lot because of those ice storms that we had in the spring. We had all those icing events. So they weren't doing a lot of plowing, but they were putting down a lot of material. I don't know if you recall, but
I just remember it being a light winter. I don't remember the details of
yeah,
it.
but there were a lot of ice
Flush
events.
Yeah.
So in like March, I know they had to put down an extraordinary amount, and we had like kind of back to back to back. So they weren't doing a lot of plowing. They were doing mostly just putting down the material to melt the ice. So I think that's probably why. And also, in general, you see the majority of expense in the beginning of the year, not usually at the end of the year. So like now we're, where are we? Almost November. And apart from one blizzard that I recall on Halloween, however many years ago that was,
Right.
Remember that.
Then Thanksgiving, we had a Thanksgiving.
We had a
storm,
Thanksgiving
like
one.
10 or 11 inches
Yep.
of heavy, wet snow.
Right.
That
But-
was October 2011. It just came up on my mom's Facebook.
Yeah.
Yeah, we lost 2 cruisers in that storm, that Halloween storm.
Yeah.
Brand new one got T-boned. And anyway, but this is the other thing too is we do stockpile the winter salt and sand, and we look at what we have left over at the end of the year. But we can only house so much of it. We can't buy it all and put it someplace and protect it. So we do have to purchase throughout the season. The road materials I just explained. It's really dependent upon how many repairs have to be made, the ditches, and keeping in mind the fact that there was a lot of turnover within the department, and I think that also led to different things being done at different times. So I do expect that we're going to be using all of that in the future. If you were to look at our road plan, and as I talk about the warrant articles that we've got coming up, you're going to see that we're going to have to be doing more repairs and less paving in the near future until we build back some of the capital reserve there. In terms of subcontractors, winter storm cleanup, we used to use contractors for hauling away the snow. The director feels as though we still need to keep some money in case we have a big event and we've got a lot of snow we got to get rid of. But other than that, he's reduced that significantly. Building and grounds maintenance, he's brought this down a little bit too. And then road construction, we've taken this down to $1. We'll be talking about that when we get to the warrant article. Storm drains, this is something that's done every other year. They've done it for this year. We're skipping 25 and it'll be done again in 26. So that's why you see the reduction there. We keep $1 in for sidewalk construction. There has been some repairs done this year, but nothing significant. The signs and safety equipment, we had to replace a good number of signs this year and get other signage, but he's expecting less of that this next year. I think there was a requirement to change out a certain type of sign with another, and then there was some ARPA money spent on crosswalk signs. Some of the signage that came isn't compliant with New Hampshire DOT, and so there's a little bit of this line will have to be used to replace. I think there's 4 yellow diagonal signs that have to be replaced.
Did we not know what the DOT requirements were before we bought?
Apparently not.
I'm livid. I'm livid when I found
You
out
don't
we
look livid.
spent $12,000 on signs that we can't use.
No, we spent more than that.
hit
You don't want to know,
hit a
but
nerve.
Now I'm even more livid. And we've got these
We
signs.
can't send them back?
Huh?
We can't send them back?
this was all custom made for the town.
Apparently you didn't use the sign shop at the prison, did you?
And this is a different kind of sign.
This was
New crosswalk.
this was generated by.
Flashing signs with the little walking man and whatnot.
So this was generated
That's the state.
outside of the.
The sign shop is a place down in Winnisquam.
Well, in any event, there's some signs that have to be replaced on the equipment that we did receive, and those will be paid out of that. Street lighting, we're on track. This is always in arrears that you see on here, but we're on track. We're going to be, I'm very proud because that's one that's really tough to budget, but I think we're going to be right on the money by the end of the year. Parks, buildings and ground maintenance. This is where DPW supports the activities of the Parks Commission at Riverfront Park primarily. And again, repairs, supplies, mulch. You can read the types of things that they spend the money on there. And that completes the highway budget. For sanitation, so this recycling processing, there's an opportunity that this could be reduced further, I think. And it depends also on what we're looking at from a startup time frame. When the recycling attendant would be in place. This is not where the recycling attendant is budgeted, but this is for other costs associated with it. So materials, other things they may find that they need, pallets or other things for storage. But I think this can be further reduced, maybe another $1,000 or so, or I'm sorry, $2,500. Bring it down to $2,500. That's one of the things that we're reevaluating. The residential solid waste. So this is our 1,635 ton times $95 a ton. And then we budgeted about $2,500 for replacement bins and parts. So this is when your garbage bin, the top breaks or it cracks and, you need a replacement. Casella supplies all this, but we have to purchase those, or if there's a new house or a new cluster development, those all have to be purchased. And you just never know what you're going to pay. Recently, we've had a number of higher costs associated with that. I don't know if that's because of the cold weather or people moving, or sometimes they take them with them, which they're not supposed to. But in any case, that's budgeted in there as well. And you can see the subsequent year rates on the tonnage. So 2025 is $95 a ton, and 26 it goes up to 100, and you see the rest of the contract through 2029 is up to $115 a ton. In the commercial solid waste, so this is essentially a pass-through of the haulers that operate in town. The town has a flow control ordinance which requires any commercial haulers that have contracts with, say, any of the commercial or residential properties with dumpsters, that they're required to take that to Wheelabrator, which is now Wind Waste in Concord. And as part of that, when they go down to Wheelabrator, those are tagged as Tilton trash. We get an invoice for it. We in turn bill the haulers for their tipping fees, plus an administrative fee over and above that. And this last year, generally this works pretty well, but you can see that our revenue is, or our expense is down this year, as is our revenue, if you were to look at the revenue side. And that's primarily because we had one of our larger haulers decide that they had a better deal with Wheelabrator and they could just circumvent our flow control, which the board put a stop to. And then subsequent to that, another hauler consolidated two other haulers into their operation. And we saw a drop off of the activity, and I'm working with them right now to make the town whole in terms of our administrative costs, because they absolutely had their hauling didn't drop off, but
The garbage is still there.
the garbage is still there. It just didn't go through the town's process. So again, another issue of obfuscating the flow control, whether it was intentional or not. So I've reduced this sum for next year, only because it seems as though generally we will budget whatever we budget here in expense. It's also budgeted in revenue, so it's in effect a pass through. Mm-hmm. But we should still be seeing our administrative fees paid. Outside of that, there's the household hazardous waste that we pay for each year. The reason why this is such an increase is mainly because we didn't have the pricing for 24 when it was budgeted, and that was a prior year budget, and the amount came in at 4485. So you really have to look at their increase from year to year is the 4485 to 4710. So while our budgeted percentage increase is 42%, the amount that they increased from year to year was not. Sanitation demo material removal. So this is our amnesty. A lot of this is our amnesty week. There's also there's some other items that get put into demo removal. There's a practice at DPW. They do not inspect what's in bags. So if somebody comes in with a bag of demo material, they don't go through it for health reasons. Mm-hmm. You just never know if there's something that could hurt someone or otherwise, so they don't look through those. Those get deposited, and I've seen plenty of people with, car or truck, and they pull up and they just dump a couple of bags out into those big demo receptacles. And then there are other people that come in and they buy the purple bags for kitchen trash, for overflow kitchen trash, and then they take them, and down there there's a place where you can put them in a dumpster for kitchen trash. But you have to come into town hall and buy those bags. There are other people, yet again, that can contract through Casella for a yellow top bin that they can have at their house, that Casella charges X amount of money for, and the town receives a certain portion of that revenue that they receive which covers the cost of the tipping fees of the amount of trash in there, as well as an additional administrative fee for the bin. So if somebody, can never get everything in their household, if they've got 10 people in their household and they can't get everything into one bin, they can arrange to lease one of these over the course of a year, or two of them or more if they need that. And it's in effect somebody that doesn't need a full-size residential dumpster, they can get that. So that's part of our tipping as well, but we do have revenues that are associated with that. Outside of that, the curbside contract, I was right, it is the third year of a 5-year contract, and it went from 205,000 up to 215, and that is by contract. And so you see the overall change in the public works sanitation budget of a reduction of 2.3%. In the police department, so there's 20 and a half staff positions with 2 open positions, and the half position is the remainder of an intern that we've had this past year. So we had the intern from essentially a July through June of 25 period. So half year this year, half year next year. And other than that, you see the command staff is made up of 5 people: the chief, the lieutenant, 2 sergeants, and the attorney prosecutor. The chief and attorney prosecutor are both on contracts. Then there are 2 detectives budgeted, 8 patrol, 1 SRO, which during the summertime, that's the school resource officer, which during the summertime is also assigned to patrol. And then communications specialists, there are 3, which are dispatchers, 1 of which is a supervisor. And then there's an administrator, and then the intern. The open positions are the 1 detective and 1 patrol. And then that intern position, by the way, is 100% grant reimbursed. And so there's no additional cost to the town, including taxes and so forth. You see the salary for the chief is the first item, and then the salaries for the officers' wages. That includes the command staff and then the staff listed below. So there's 15 total budgeted there. And then overtime, you can see we've already overexpended, but keeping in mind that this year, if you look at the officers' wages, we're significantly under where we would be normally. And in overtime, we're overspent, and that's because we didn't have the staff during the year. We're now, for the majority of the year, we had more open positions. And now we're just down to the 2 open positions. The holiday pay is paid once a year for the officers, and that will be done the first pay period of December. Compensated absences, again, that is for the comp time that we have to buy out at the end of the year that they've accrued, where they haven't taken it as overtime. They can elect to have comp time, which they can use to take time off, or if they haven't been able to take time off at the end of the year, the town buys it back. The other portion of that compensated absences is there are a couple of people that have the ability to buy out a certain amount of their time, again, because of the employee benefit that I mentioned in the administrative department. And then you see the merit raise pool. That's for the non-union employees and for those that are on contract. On page 10, this is the support staff. So there's 4.5 people budgeted there, which is the communications supervisor, 2 communications specialists, which are dispatchers, the 1 administrative assistant for the department, and then the grant position, which is the half position, which is, again, 100% reimbursed. You see the part-time wages. We will generally expend this throughout the entire year. And I'll just point out that while there's only a 5% increase in the officers' wages, there's a 29, almost 30% increase in this support staff line. Some of that is due to the fact that we do have to budget for the grant person, but we do have the revenues that offset that portion. Grant expenses, we keep that line open. This would be for when they do Click It or Ticket or other state-sponsored programs of which they haven't been able to take advantage of late. or maybe they haven't been offered, but. And then you see the FICA, Medicare, life disability, retirement. Again, Group 1 retirement is going down. The health insurance, dental, retirement for Group 2, those are all going up. And you'll see that Group 2 retirement is also going down effective July 1st. Group 2 retirement is for those that essentially carry guns and have arrest powers. The Group 1 is for the administrative personnel and non-union personnel at the PD. The PD office supplies, they've already spent that line. I would expect they're probably going to come close to that this next year. One of the big things that they did this year was there was a storage room full of filing cabinets, which the chief had been successful in, I think, 22, purchasing a used high-density storage system that was sitting in one of the Sally ports for the longest time. And they finally, with the help of the intern and the staff, were able to put that in place in the file room and get that organized. And that required a considerable amount of supplies to get that all set up properly. They still have storage, as I mentioned before, down in the basement here that's secure storage, it's locked, that needs to be moved over and put into that high density system, and I'm expecting that that is also going to generate additional cost. The prosecutor by contract has certain expenses paid for by the town, including their bar costs and some books and some other things, and that's within, written into their contract. The dues for the PD, those are they have each year. There's some of which they get some benefits out of in terms of access to other resources or grants, and some of those are for the chief. The postage expense, they've been pretty good about keeping that pretty low. They do a lot more emailing of things and of reports and whatnot that would have been sent out by postage before. Printing is primarily for all the slips that they need, and they generally will buy multi-year at one time. And I don't know whether they're planning on doing a large purchase at the end of this year, but I think most of those things come from the printing, the state printing group. And then this is where I mentioned earlier, the cameras, the taser equipment. This is for communications equipment maintenance on an annual basis. There's a huge amount of cost associated with all the communications equipment we have, the repeaters, the equipment within the PD itself is very expensive, and we have to maintain it under a contract. The Cellbrite license, again, that's for the cell phone dumping. The radio recording, all of our radio transmissions are recorded, which is best practice. And then Belknap Tower maintenance, we have to pay the state each year for general maintenance for our repeater over on Belknap Mountain because they do have to go in there sometimes with a helicopter to get to it. And there are various things that they have to do. And every agency that's on that tower has to pay a certain amount each year towards that. The miscellaneous expense, this is for the advertising that they have to do, immunizations, meetings, awards, ceremonies. And you see the electricity. So just so you know, the PD heating and cooling is primarily electrical in nature. And if you've been over there, you've probably experienced in the room, it's either too cold, too warm, too humid, not humid enough. And it's the one room we have problems with is that community room. All the rest of it operates very nicely and very efficiently. You see the cost of the heat. I think we'll be on track with both of those through the end of the year. There is no septic, there is a septic system there. We are not tied into sewer. When we built the building, it was going to be about another $170,000 expense to tie into sewer, and it was just not deemed feasible at the time, and the septic system was put in. Water, we have to pay for sprinkler heads, which is the majority of the expense there through the water district. And then building maintenance. All of our major systems in the building are maintained. The HVAC maintenance is done twice a year, and it is expensive, but they do about 30 pages worth of work twice a year on all the filters, and they're all over the building, and they service the equipment, and it's properly maintained. The generator is run periodically. That's a huge generator that can operate the entire building. Janitorial supplies, the fire alarm inspection, and miscellaneous replacement parts for during the year complete that line. We have had to, the fire alarm inspection increase this last year, and we have had occasion where we've had issues with some of the door strikes that are electronic, and those are kind of expensive to replace. Where we've been able to recoup the warranties on those. But some of that was a learning experience. They were being cleaned with the wrong or oiled when they shouldn't have been, and that caused some issues. The janitorial expense, this is the portion. Now, for the PD, this is done $124.34 a visit 3 times a week. That's by the same group that does the town hall here. Building improvements, it's a new building. They rarely have to spend much money in this area. And I would have to ask the chief. I don't recall the detail on that. New uniforms, we do have to budget for this. Per the collective bargaining agreement, each officer is entitled to a certain schedule of pants, shirts, overcoat, all this sort of stuff, that if they all went and purchased this, it'd be far exceed the budgeted figure that we have here. But we try to modulate where we think it's going to be appropriate. It helps when we have a stable staff, because then we're not like, oh gosh, this guy was short, this one's tall. We got to get all new stuff for this guy because we don't have anything that's going to fit him. So that accounts for the increase there for new employees. Officer stipends, this is written into the agreement as well. There are 13 people that qualify for these $200 stipends, and these are things that they can purchase. Oftentimes they're sights or certain kind of flashlight. There's certain things they can spend these on if it's part of their uniform and something helps them in the execution of their duties. Other things are not permitted, which are more cosmetic in nature. Uniform maintenance. This is cleaning of the uniforms. Occasionally there'll be some maintenance, true maintenance required, seamstress, that sort of thing. When they change their patches, these get sewn on. Everything comes out of that line. That again is it's one of those that is a CBA issue. They could spend more in that. They're pretty judicious about how what they send for cleaning. In terms of training, so Police One Academy is a subscription service that allows them to get to all kinds of online training for police officers. It's a great deal. It was something that was new, I think 2 years ago. The FBI LEDA training, this is really for bringing people up for supervision and management, helping them to progress in their careers and in a law enforcement environment, and then other training. So where the chief has been really successful is, and because of our facility, he's been able to schedule in other groups to come in and do training at our facility. And part of the offset of providing our facility for that use is that we get a seat or 2 for free. So everybody else is paying the vendor for that training, but we get a freebie in the process. And they've held a pretty good schedule. If you ever pass by the PD and you see the gravel parking lot all parked up, chances are there's a training going on that week. PD, gas and diesel, of course, they operate all gas vehicles, and you can see that they are pretty much in line with where we would be for the year. This again is in arrears, So this is a month behind the current month. Vehicle maintenance, this is where I talked about kind of a formula for how we look at these. So the three frontline vehicles are all Chevy Tahoes, the police packages, and those we budgeted $1,000 each. There's 7 midline vehicles ranging from the attorney prosecutor to the chief lieutenant. Supervisory vehicles, those we're budgeting all $2,500 a piece for those. And then the detail cars, there's 2 of those at $500 a piece. And if you ask some people, they'd say, well, as long as you can tow them to the site and turn the lights on, that's a moneymaker. But they do have to be able to drive there. And with the 2 vehicles that we just acquired, which, as I mentioned before, were these very nice police interceptors, and I'll just show you. These are the types that we just are receiving now. One with like 36,000 miles, and the other with 24,000 miles. One's a 20 and one's a 21. So those are going to replace 2 of the existing vehicles that are in the midline group. But again, it's pretty easy to spend $2,500 a year if you're replacing tires, and these vehicles are putting on a lot of mileage. So we think that we're appropriately budgeted for that for 25. One of the things that we had to suffer in 24, there was a problem with some of the older police interceptors where if the water pump went, the engine would have to be removed to replace the water pump. And it would cost anywhere from $2,700 or more. We had to pay for that to be done at an outside agency because our mechanic had left, who was the director, and he had done a number of those for us in the past. So we had to, we just had to pay what it required in order to have the car in service. We're hoping that's not going to be the case moving forward. And Ford did change the design with the newer models. So hopefully we won't have more of those. Radio communications, generally speaking, we get grants for our radios. And if we have to spend anything, it's half the cost of a radio, which is what you see here. But we also have to spend money periodically on reprogramming. So if somebody changes their frequency in another agency, and we're one that talks to them frequently, we're going to have to go through the cost of reprogramming all of our radios. They are all digital now, but it happens, and sometimes we have problems with radios that have to be repaired. Weapons expense, they will spend this line to every last penny this year. This is generally ammo, but with all the new employees, they have to go through all the training, and they have to certify on long guns. They have to certify on handguns down at the academy. So they go through a lot of ammo in the process of doing so, and it has to be supplied by the agency. So as our staff is more stable, hopefully that's not going to be as much of an expense. There are also taser supplies are in there, pistol range expense for just the officers that have been with us for a while. And then investigative expense, really, these are all sorts of things from the blood draws that when they have a DUI, court transcripts, this could be rubber gloves, crime scene supplies.
Pool cameras?
Well, not the camera itself, but it could be things associated with surveillance.
Yeah.
Yep.
I'm gonna
Yes.
interrupt. I have to leave now, so
Okay,
I'm gonna
sure.
excuse myself, but you have enough people here anyways.
Yeah, okay.
I'll listen to the rest on the.
Sorry,
recording.
we're almost done.
Yeah,
And
yeah.
so I promise I'll be.
That's fine, yeah.
I will. I told you it was going to be a lot tonight.
Yes, no, I know.
Yeah.
Better
Um,
wrap it up soon. I'm old. I need to go to bed.
All right. Well, let me keep going here. Equipment purchases. So this is so one of the things that I'm hoping will have some pricing for the board for this year. We put a slab in last year at the police department for an impound lot, but there's no fence, there's no lighting, and there are no cameras, so we can't house any vehicles there as yet. And So the expenses with that are being quoted right now, and maybe that's something that we can encumber. The $4,000 that's listed here is not sufficient for any one of those, possibly for the camera or some lighting, but not to the degree that it would be in full operation. The PD maintains a legal expense line. This could probably be reduced some because it's generally used for the collective bargaining agreement negotiations. But if there's any grievance during the year, that would have to be run through the attorney, and that can run up to several thousand very quickly. Outside of that, that's the we're required to keep the emergency management lines in there. And that results in the 8.3% increase. The big reduction there, as you see, is the $35,000 in the equipment purchase line, because we had encumbered $35,000 for the purchase of the Tahoe 3, which was done at the beginning of the year. In Culture and Recreation, you can read through all the items of the Parks Commission expenses, and Bill is an expert on the Parks Commission expenses, being a long-term member. But essentially, they've got operational expenses, administrative expenses, and then programs. So their programs, which is roughly maybe 30% of their, 25% of their budget, is for the shows that they put on that are very popular with the kids. The Magic Show, there's a guy, Fred, that puts on a great show. Animal Education, they do twice a year. And
The Christmas event.
the Christmas is
big.
the biggest of the year.
One of my favorite things.
Yep. So in any event, that's the Parks Commission expense. It was reduced slightly, and as I mentioned, they did request that, or they did note that to me that they were going to go out and look for other cleaning quotes. So I did have the company that had quoted us on Town Hall and Police quote them separately, which was sent to them. Parks maintenance for the island. There's a certain amount set aside if there's any, if we had to take down a tree that was endangering something, it would cover that. It would cover mowing on the island. There has been very little maintenance done. It was mowed once this last year. And then there is an engineering group working on options for the bridge for the Board of Selectmen, and that's not going to be paid out of this line, but some of it could be. And the majority of that was determined to be paid out of the Island Capital Reserve Fund, which the board had approved this last year when they executed the contract. And there may be some changes to that as we progress. Hall Memorial Library, you can see the increase there. I'm sure they'll be coming to you, right?
Oh, yeah, we will.
Culture and Recreation. So I won't go through the rest of those, other than to say that Park Cemetery has been asking for an increase for years. You can see it there, and you see the outside agencies.
Can I just ask a question on Old Home Day? Why does it look like 3,200? That's bizarre.
3,200.
You guys only give us 3,000.
Says we spent 3,200.
Something wrong with that.
Yeah, that is.
Yeah,
Yeah.
if you can look at that, because you
I
don't
will.
give us 32, you give us 3.
Right. So something must have gotten charged.
It's in
to
the
that.
wrong count.
Yep.
No, it shows that you expended that in
Right.
2024.
Yeah, I see that.
Smart Alex.
Yeah, I'll look into that. Okay, so moving on very quickly, revenues. You can see what our 24 budget was, $1.9 million roughly. The sewer is a pass-through, so the same amount is budgeted for revenues and expense. But the $1.9 million are the municipal revenues. You can see what I was anticipating we're going to end up through the end of the year, which we have to estimate our revenues for our tax rate setting, and that's the amount I came up with. And then you can see how I've budgeted the 2025 revenue. We can go through these at another time when I'm here, but essentially a slight increase in revenues. And then on the very last page, you can see these are the recommendations for warrant articles and the tax rate for 2025. So roads and streets, bridges, sidewalks, because of the work that was done this last year on Morrison Avenue and Grant Street, and then the rework that's having to be done for Morrison Avenue, it's going to have to be reworked. That we are going to deplete that capital reserve fund. So in order to affect what we need for 2025 to be able to do a very limited number of streets in the Tree Street area, we're going to have to put in $120,000. Once the dust settles with what we have to do on Grant Street and Morrison Avenue, so there's not only the redoing of Morrison Avenue, but there's also the top coat for both Morrison and Grant Street. That'll leave us with about $115,000 by the end of the year. Academy is a whole separate issue. There's an engineering plan that's going on right now. The engineer is working on what it's going to cost to repair and build a wall along there, which has been deteriorating. More than likely, I'm going to recommend a short-term note, a $300,000 bond at 10 years at, say, a municipal rate of 3.19% through the bond bank is somewhere around $36,000 a year. So it could end up being something like that, but until we know how much it's going to cost to do Academy Street, we won't have anything set aside for that. The only thing that's been accounted for is the engineering services to date. Highway equipment, this is the $60,000. Again, I'll be talking to the selectmen and the budget committee more about doing that revolving fund and offsetting this in future years. Building infrastructure, this is for roofs, major components of buildings, and this is trying to build this up so that we don't get caught as we did this last year with the first floor of Town Hall. Island preservation and improvement, this is the capital reserve fund that's paying for the engineering for the bridge currently, and historically we put in about $10,000 into that. It's not going to be sufficient for anything other than either the resetting of the blocks or looking at the water flow around the island and the engineering. But in terms of the actual bridge expense, that's going to be done through the $500,000 grant we were awarded and any bonding that would have to be done over and above that. The reval capital reserve fund, that's based on how much we anticipate having left over at the end of this year, and then taking the full cost of those 5 years of updates for the assessing services. It'd be about $18,500 a year. Improving and maintaining lakes, the Conservation Commission, who are the agents of this fund, recommend putting in $5,000 a year, and they spend anywhere from $4,000 to $6,000 during the year, pretty much. And then the senior center just received a new bus this last year that was paid largely with some of our ARPA funds, which are the COVID era grant funds for state and local governments. And so because of that, there was no money deemed to be able to have to put into that. So all the warrant articles in total are $233,428, roughly 22 cents on the 2025 estimated tax rate. If you look at our 24 valuation, it's $1.078 billion. So keeping in mind that as we go through anything in this budget, think of $10,800 as a penny on the tax rate. So if you want to increase or if you want to decrease 1 penny on the tax rate, you take out $10,800. So it's basically a thousandth of this valuation. The estimated fund balance, if the board ends up using $500,000 currently, we have $1,337,000 in fund balance currently, which is about 9% of fund 9% of our total appropriations. So if they use the $500,000 and then anticipating what we're going to end up with at the end of the year, even after encumbrances and year-end purchases, I estimate we'll have somewhere around $837,000 in fund balance at the end of next year. And if you include the entirety of this budget that's on the first page under the recommended, and then add to it the sewer and of last year's sewer amount, and then also the moneyed warrant articles, that's $7,260,000, less the estimated revenues, which were on the prior page. Also included in there is the sewer, again, the pass-through. That leaves the net tax of $4.5 million, or roughly $4.18 before any adjustments. So those adjustments would be war service credits, exemptions, things of that sort. And the operating budget only portion of it would be $3.96 on the tax rate. Now, keeping in mind that is just the municipal portion. That's just the town. That's not the county, the school, state school, local school, or fire district. So,
What percentage of our entire tax dollar is with the town?
I'm glad you asked. I can tell you exactly. It was 29% last year, and this year it is about 28% if they use this amount of fund balance.
Okay.
Now, if we use $500,000 of the fund balance to help offset the taxes, what percentage does our taxes go up? 3%, 3.6%?
Next year?
This year.
Oh, this year. So that is roughly.
Not the tax rate, but the budgeting. How much does the budget go up if we use $500,000?
Well, so the budget is the budget. So theoretically, you're looking at a 3.6% increase. I'm not sure.
Tax
For
rate.
10,000 you save a penny.
You want to know how it affects the tax rate?
So next year, what I can tell you is next year, this year, if you reduce by $500,000, you're at about a $3.8 million portion. You're going to go up roughly 13 to 14% in taxed money to the public next year. So you're roughly at a 1% increase over last year.
So we look really good because
This year,
it's only
right.
going to be 1%, but next year it's going to be a sledgehammer.
Right, and as you know, because I have apprised the board of all the reasons why and why not, because I was recommending a little less so that we had some money left next year, because for me, one of the most important things is to have a stable tax rate. It may be increasing, but if it spikes like this, it is near impossible for residences, because anybody that's got an escrow account, then the bank is going to want to times 1.5. They're going to want to retain, and
then the next year the bank is going to take less for the escrow account, and when the tax bill comes, they're not going to have enough money in that escrow account to cover the taxes.
So when it spikes, it's not good for anybody, and it's not good for businesses. I was a small business owner, and it used to drive me crazy if things would change precipitously, where you have no planning and no confidence in what's going on.
The budget committee can't affect that, correct?
No, there's no ability other than to talk to their selectmen and say, I want you to, or I don't want you to, that sort of thing.
Well, my personal feeling is that we take $250,000 this year and $250,000 next year to keep the rate from going 1%, 14%, and keep it. Yeah, our part went up 7% or whatever. Okay.
What has your fund balance been at normally, though? Consistently, because you might have some next year in the fund balance that you can.
Well,
use
yeah.
again.
So I'm looking at. We're probably going to put in. Depending upon how much is encumbered and expended at year end, I'm thinking we're going to be somewhere in the maybe 150 range of putting back in. So I'm pretty comfortable with 400,000. That's what I had originally recommended to the board, but keeping in mind that it's an artificial reduction. It doesn't reflect the true cost, but the county's the same way. And the county can use fund balance. The school's the same way. The county went up. We haven't published our tax rate yet because the board has to decide how much fund balance they have to use. But I can tell you the county, in terms of tax from one year to the next, went up $188,000 on an $888,000 payment that we made last year. So it went up 21%. The fire district went up $465,000 on a $1.7 million payment, right, that we had last year. It went up to 2.221 million this year, 465,000, a 26% increase in tax that we pay.
Mhm.
So I always look at the net appropriation, because that's really, you can't go by rates and things like that, because there are levers you can play with to get a certain rate, but there's no messing with the net appropriation, which is you take the total thing that was approved by a town meeting or district meeting, you remove all the grants, you remove the revenues from that, any other adjustments, and there's a net number. This is what we're going to raise in taxation. That's the number that really counts. And so the fire district's going up $465,000 from year to year, 26%. County up 21% year to year, $188,000. And I have no idea what that formula is for the county, but we were the largest percent increase for the Belknap County. The next closest was Belmont at 13 and change percent. We weren't the largest dollar figure in the increase. The largest dollar figure was, I think, Laconia, but they were a smaller percentage increase. So in any event, it's something just to be aware of, but it puts pressure on us because our portion is say, as we're a third of this, even using a lot of fund balance, it only affects so much. And the other effect that you have to remember for this year, the two areas where assessments really went up the largest were in the effectively the lower end of the residential market. So mobile homes went up an incredible percentage because that's what was happening in the market.
Mm-hmm.
Things that went for $120,000 the year before.
It's almost gone down because the commercial rates are dropping because the residential rates are surpassing all that.
And that's the other effect. A lot of the large real estate, large commercial properties in town, they're going to pay less tax in 24 than they paid in 23, whereas residential properties are just the opposite. And that's because commercial properties went up this much, but residential properties went up this much. And I could see that when we were doing the MS1, when they were doing the valuation, but you're really going to see it. And some of the selectmen have seen some of the pro forma tax rates I did for some of the properties in town. And you see some really big ones go down quite a bit. And most residential properties are going to be even or pay more. And in some cases pay a great deal more if they were in, on the lower end of the market that appreciated so much. So mobile homes and multifamily properties had the largest percent increases year to year. And so that's just the way it went.
Tim, thank you for this great in-depth.
It was in depth. Yes, it was.
And,
hopefully not to be repeated anytime soon.
Every line, we went through every line.
We did.
Thank you guys for hanging in here. I know this is one of the longer meetings that we'll have this year.
Oh, good.
But next week, we're looking at Home Memorial Library and the Pines Community Center. So if you haven't done your homework, please look at their
I've done lots of homework so far. I've got questions and comments.
Sure. Okay, great. Yeah.
Is there anything anybody needs me to ask them for next weekend that you want me to have added to?
What was the second one? Parks Community Center?
Pines
Pines.
Community Center. Yeah.
Pines.
I think
Like nothing came through with the
Yay.
paperwork?
right.
Okay.
Yeah, I do have some of the other like CAP and VNA. We usually get a better comparison of the other towns that they also give to. We like to look at that. They give out a lot of money, but I like to see the breakdown between towns.
Something like that. Didn't they do that last year too? They had
Right,
to-
we had to ask them
So
to do it
something
last
like that.
year too, I think. Yeah.
The Association for the Blind, just as a for instance. I'm all for that, but if we've got one blind person at their,
They haven't come in for.
They didn't.
oh, they haven't even come in? That's because we weren't giving them money.
Right.
It was why would we pay for a service we don't use?
Right, right.
Okay, so that's the only thing so far, and then
Other,
we'll see
anything
during the
else?
meetings and see if anything else pops
I'll
up.
entertain a motion to adjourn.
I would love to make that motion to adjourn.
Second, all those in favor?
Me.
Yes, absolutely.
Thank you, everybody.
Thank you.